Hey everyone, it's Mandy from Creative Matters. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Today our program is mark making. It's called Magical Mark Making. So this is all about creating things that look really beautiful just out of lines, squiggles, wandering lines, shapes, patterns and that kind of thing. So let's get started. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to a really amazing app called Squiggla. This app is created by the Chartwell Charitable Trust, and they have created this incredible app that really encourages mark making. And they believe that that mark making develops the creative mind, and that you can get a lot of creative thinking through purely making marks on paper. And so that really is their philosophy. And they have created an amazing app that has really great resources. Unfortunately, these are like mirror writing at the moment, but they have really great resources for teachers and for parents and also for children, all around that idea of mark making. So they have lesson plans. You can go onto the app if you want to download it, and then you can also actually create a gallery, which is amazing, and then you can sort of share the galleries and share artworks, and it becomes this really beautiful way of collecting works together. They also have posters here which give you really great ideas for types of mark making you can do. So there's signs, there's shapes, there's all sorts of squiggle lines, and you can find all of these on their website, and I'll put the link at the bottom of our of the description on YouTube once it's been loaded. Wandering lines, they talk about dots, different sorts of lines, jaggedy lines and zigzags, crisscrossing lines, tiny lines and thick lines, and then also dots, lines and squiggles. So we've got all of these beautiful resources on an app or on a website which can be accessed by teachers and parents and children. So that's definitely worth checking out. And that's really what's inspired us today to do the mark making ideas. Also, we're inspired by this amazing artist from Sweden. She's based in Stockholm, and her name's Emma Larsson, and she creates really beautiful works that are using oils and acrylics and sometimes sort of watercolour and inks. And her work is very much sort of fluid line work that becomes like an abstract artwork really, but it's just sort of combining lines and shapes in different ways, and it's really beautiful. So I'll also put her link on the description of the video on YouTube, and you can check her out. Okay, so what we're going to basically be doing today is just looking at different ways we can combine lines to make a beautiful artwork at the end. And the great thing about it, as Squiggla believe and the Chartwell Trust, is that the more that you just explore different lines and shapes and look at the paper and sort of respond to things that you've done and add to it and think about where you're heading with it and think about things like contrast lines and all that kind of thing, then that is really great for your creative thinking. It's also great for critical thinking, because sometimes you're having to take some risks, or you're having to make some changes and make some modifications, or maybe you have a problem and you have to solve it. And so it's all of that critical thinking stuff, which is great stuff, and then all the creative ideas as well. So today what you'll need is some paper, some card. You might have a lot of paper if you like, because you probably will create a lot of work, which would be awesome. You could have some felt pens. You might like some coloured pencils, so I've got watercolour pencils today. I've got my paint brushes. I've also managed to find some oil pastels and some crayons. And I've also got a little bit of ink and some black Indian ink as well. So really, and also a vivid marker. So just go through whatever you have at home. It might just be felt pens, it might even just be pencils or charcoal, or it might be paint with paintbrushes. Really up to you, whatever you have, and there's no rules about the tools that you use or the materials. So if we just start with this one here, you can see that I've got lots of long lines. Some of them are thin and some of them are thick, and just adding the thick line here adds to the interest. you can see that I've filled this space quite a lot. There's not a lot of gaps in between and not a lot of space. And I've thought about the balance of the work. So initially I had all these lines here which kind of felt a little bit like plants in a way, and then I added just these little square shapes. So here we've got circles, we've got spirals, we've got wandering lines that go up and down, we've got some rectangles, and you can see that sometimes I've coloured in the rectangles and sometimes I haven't. Well, that's the outline there, and then there's another coloured in spot in the middle. And then we've got some things overlapping, so lines overlapping other lines or shapes. And you could find that you actually end up preferring it this way or this way, which is the beautiful thing about this kind of mark making. You can actually turn stuff around and just do it the way that you prefer it, which is kind of nice. It's very freeing. So you'll see this one here, I actually did this with, I think a child made this for me actually, a long time ago. And in this one, we've actually got the paint, starting with the paint. So that's a really nice idea for kind of making different marks just using paint and watercolour. I'll show you that in a minute. And then what you might like to do is let that dry and come back with maybe some ink and add on top. So we could do a squiggly line, we could do tiny little dots, lots of them all together. Hopefully you can see that. We could do bigger dots, and then you can do outlines of dots. So I've already got these lovely blue dots here, see that? And then we could do another outline with the black. It doesn't matter if things overlap, nothing needs to be perfect. All we're doing is just responding to what's there and really thinking about what we're doing. So then I've got some spaces in here which I might like to fill with a little squiggly line. And then I could do some thick brush strokes with my ink. So we're just sort of adding as we go, and as I said, always thinking. So now I might look at it and just stand back a little bit and think, what do I feel like it needs? Perhaps it needs something in this area here. So I'm going to respond to what's already there with these circles and just start adding some more black circles. Now it's starting to have a little bit more balance to it, isn't it, for me? But everyone thinks differently. That's the lovely thing about this kind of work. Some people like things to be super busy. Some like them to be very minimal. That means there's really not a lot going on. There's not a lot of marks on the paper. You might have a lot of space left. And the lovely thing about that is that that's totally fine. It's up to you how you do it. So that's one way of doing it, starting with your marks, with your paint. So I'll just show you that very quickly. Actually, no, I'm not going to show that because I don't have the watercolour paint with me, but I'm going to show you beautiful watercolour pencils. So if you colour in with the pencil like that, see the purple there, then you take your brush and you can go over that watercolour there and then spread it out so it's really quite nice and thin and much lighter. So we've got kind of a dark area and then it comes out to be a little bit thinner. So part of your mark making can be the way you actually apply the paint. See how interesting that looks. Also, you might like to think about your colour palette. What sort of colours are you going to use? Is it going to be multicoloured? Or is it going to just be a limited colour palette with not a lot of different colours? Pinks and blues only, maybe. So we could add another little bit of pink here and colour that in too. Then you might want to take it outside the shape a little bit. There's no rules why you need to actually stay inside shapes. Alright, then what you might like to do is take some pastel if you have any, or some crayon, and you could be colouring in, or you could just be doing rough lines. So here you can see that I've just filled the space a little bit, but not perfectly. Maybe that's the sort of effect I prefer. Or I could start doing some other lines with my coloured pastel, just working inside that shape. That's giving me some ideas. Okay, and then I'm going to do a little bit more. This time I've just put a little bit of coloured pencil in here, and I'm going to add water, quite roughly again. I like the idea of it not staying inside the lines completely. And also I really love the way it's dark and then it gets softer and more watery later on. Then you could take some felt pen, and then you might start adding squiggly lines. There could be overlapping lines. I'm sort of filling this space over here. Almost looks like a crazy lady's hair, doesn't it? Crazy ginger hair. Or a crazy guy. And so I'm just sort of filling this space here. And like I said before, there's no rules. We're just filling in spaces and drawing lines. So we could do some zigzags, we could do some straight lines, some crisscross or cross-hatching lines. Our lines might be going on angles, or they could be going straight up and down. All sorts of different ways of doing it, isn't there? It's pretty cool. And the lovely thing about this sort of mark making is that it's something that you can do all by yourself, or you might like to do it with your whole family, and it doesn't really require anything in particular. You don't have to do any plans. It's just very good for you to sit down and just sort of have a little bit of a play really with all these types of lines, squiggly lines, wandering lines, shapes and patterns, and just see what happens. And you might find that you end up with a beautiful work that you haven't actually planned as such, but you've really thought about it and you've got your creative mind working, so that you're noticing little things that are happening. You're thinking about composition or the arrangement of your lines and shapes and marks. So it's really quite a lovely thing to do. And I was going to show you what you might like to try out. Let me see. Was having some crayon. We start first, and then let's see if this works. Oh, that's not going to work. Okay. Then you could have something like a dropper. And you could try just doing a few little drops and then seeing if you can make marks by turning your paper around and doing some drips. So the lovely thing about that is it's very unplanned. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. As long as you have a piece of paper underneath you so that it doesn't end up on the table. Then I might try some over here. And just the way you're holding your cardboard sort of determines the way it's going to fall and the shapes and lines it's going to create. That's pretty cool, isn't it? It's pretty accidental. So if you're doing this kind of thing, you could also use food colouring and water. Then just make sure that you've got something underneath you so that you're not getting ink everywhere. And now I've got some quite interesting shapes here which I can start to build on, that are really quite accidental in some ways, but they're really beautiful, and there's some interesting shapes and spaces in between these lines. Alright, so I'm going to leave it at that, everyone. So you're going to go away now and just have a little bit of a play with all these different types of lines. You might like to check out Squiggla again on the website, or you could download the app, and I'll put that information, as I said, on the description of the video. And we're thinking about all of these things like dots, lines, squiggles, wandering lines, signs, shapes, patterns, and then using all sorts of different media, whatever you can find. You can even cut up papers and make different shapes and patterns and add that on as well. Alright, so I'll leave it at that. Have a lovely time exploring, and don't forget to do all of that amazing creative thinking. And hopefully I'll see you on Squiggla, and you can download some of your images that you create. Great to see you, everybody.